The night sky over Yemen lit up. Explosions echoed through the cities. The United States had unleashed its military might. Airstrikes targeted the Houthi rebels. The strikes were swift and brutal. The initial reports were devastating. At least 53 people were dead. Many were civilians, including innocent children. The world watched in horror as images of the carnage emerged. The attacks focused on the capital, Sana'a, but other cities were not spared. Sada, Al-Baida, Rada, and Taiz all felt the impact. The US claimed it was targeting military installations. They aimed to cripple the Houthis' ability to attack shipping lanes, but the human cost was impossible to ignore. The strikes left a trail of destruction. Homes were shattered, hospitals overwhelmed. The already dire humanitarian crisis in Yemen had reached a new breaking point. The US promised more strikes to come. They vowed to continue until the Houthis ceased their attacks. The message was clear. America was prepared to escalate the conflict. But at what cost? The world held its breath, bracing for the aftermath. The US administration was quick to defend its actions. They called the strikes a necessary response to Houthi aggression. The Houthis, they claimed, were a terrorist organization. They were backed by Iran and posed a threat to international shipping. The US had a duty to act, to protect its interests and those of its allies. President Trump called the strikes a success. He declared that multiple Houthi leaders had been eliminated. He promised to use overwhelming lethal force to protect American lives. His words were met with a mix of support and condemnation. Secretary of State Marco Rubio pointed the finger at Iran. He accused Tehran of supplying the Houthis with weapons and money. He insisted that the strikes would continue until Iran stopped meddling in Yemen. The message was clear. The US saw this as part of a broader conflict with Iran, but many questioned the US narrative. They argued that the strikes were illegal and counterproductive. They would only exacerbate the humanitarian crisis and push Yemen further into chaos. The US, they claimed, was playing a dangerous game. The Houthi response was swift and defiant. They condemned the US strikes as an act of aggression. They vowed to retaliate and defend their country. Their leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, issued a chilling warning. He promised to turn the Red Sea into a sea of fire. The Houthis launched a barrage of missiles and drones. They targeted the USS Harry S. Truman and its accompanying warships. The US claimed to have shot down most of the projectiles, but the message was clear. The Houthis were willing to fight back. The Houthis claimed their attacks were justified. They were defending themselves against foreign aggression. They also pointed to Israel's actions in Gaza as a motivating factor. The Houthis vowed to continue their attacks until the blockade of Gaza was lifted. They saw themselves as part of a broader resistance movement against Western imperialism. The Houthi counterstrike sent shockwaves through the region. It raised fears of a wider conflict. The situation was becoming increasingly volatile. The world watched nervously, hoping for a diplomatic solution. The international community reacted with a mixture of condemnation and concern. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for restraint. He urged all parties to avoid actions that could escalate the conflict. He stressed the need for a political solution to the crisis. Russia, a longtime ally of Syria, condemned the US strikes. They accused the US of violating international law. They called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. They urged all parties to return to the negotiating table. Iran, the alleged backer of the Houthis, denied any involvement in the attacks on shipping. They warned the US against any further aggression. They insisted that they would respond forcefully to any threats against their interests. The US found itself increasingly isolated. Its actions were widely condemned. Even its allies expressed reservations. The strikes were seen as reckless and counterproductive. They had only made a bad situation worse. The world hoped for a swift and peaceful resolution to the crisis, but the path to peace seemed as elusive as ever.